In today's web development, APIs connect our apps to the server, but they must be secure. One popular solution is JSON Web Tokens, or JWT, a safe and compact way to share user data. In this tutorial, I'll show you how to set up JWT authentication in Laravel 12 from installing Laravel, adding the JWT package, creating login and register endpoints, and protecting your roots. An API, or application programming interface, is basically a set of rules that lets different software systems communicate with each other. Think of it as a messenger that takes a request from one program, delivers it to another, and then brings back the response. This is how websites, mobile apps, and even smart devices get data and services from backend servers. JWT, or JSON Web Token, is a standard way to securely send information in the form of a small JSON object. It's self-contained, meaning it carries all the data needed, and it's digitally signed, so it can't be tampered with. JWTs are often used for user authentication in websites and mobile apps, letting the server verify who you are without keeping session data on the server. Why use JWT in Laravel? Stateless authentication is like having a boarding pass at the airport. You don't need the airline to remember you in their system. Between steps, all your flight details are printed right on the pass. It's scalable and great for APIs because the server doesn't have to keep track of session data. It works across different domains and platforms, so the same authentication system can be used by websites, mobile apps, and even other services without extra setup. It ensures that user information is sent securely, so even if someone intercepts the data, they can't read or change it. Tutorial overview. We will build a RESTful API in Laravel 12 with the following endpoints: endpoint, method, description. The API auth register endpoint is used to register a new user. You send a post request with the user's details like name, email, and password, and the server creates a new account for them. The API auth login endpoint lets a user log in. You send a post request with their email and password, and if the credentials are correct, the server returns a JWT token for authentication. The API auth profile endpoint is used to get information about the currently authenticated user. You send a post request with your token, and the server returns your user details. The AP auth refresh endpoint lets you refresh your JWT token. You send a post request with your current token, and the server gives you a new token to keep your session active. The API auth/logout endpoint logs out the user and invalidates their JWT token. After this, the token can't be used to access protected routes anymore. Step 1. Install Laravel 12. If you don't already have it, you can install Laravel 12 using Composer by running the command shown on screen. Now open a new terminal in VS Code. Next, navigate to your project folder using. Now paste the command you need to run in the terminal. We'll install a new Laravel project named example app in your current directory. After the project is created, open it in VS Code by clicking File, Open Folder, and selecting your project folder. Step 2. Enable API authentication and customize how authentication exceptions are handled. Laravel 12's API routes need to be enabled. You can do this by running the command shown on screen, which sets up the API authentication routes for your project. Next, check that your routes folder is set up correctly, then run partisan install .api in the terminal. This command will install and configure the API authentication routes for your project. Once the command finishes, you'll see a message saying one new database migration has been published. Would you like to run all pending database migrations? Type yes and press enter to run the migrations. Next, open the bootstrap/app.php file and update it to customize the authentication exception response for API routes. This ensures that when a user tries to access a protected route without permission, the server returns a clear JSON response. Now copy this code snippet and paste it into your Bootstrap app.php file. This will customize the authentication exception for API routes, so any unauthorized requests return a proper JSON response. Step 3. Install the JWT package. This package will help us handle JSON Web Tokens for secure API authentication in our Laravel project. Run this command: composer require p open source saver JWT auth. It installs the JWT authentication package we'll use to manage tokens in Laravel 12. Next, publish the package configuration. This will create the config file where you can customize JWT settings for your project. Now run this command. This publishes the JWT package configuration so you can customize its settings. Next, generate the JWT secret key, which will be added to your .env file. This key is used to sign and verify tokens for secure authentication. Run the command p-artisan.secret. This will generate a secret key and add it to your .env file, which is necessary for signing and verifying JWT tokens. Let's move your env file and set your database configuration. For example, after opening the env file, paste your database configuration there. This tells Laravel how to connect to your MySQL database for the project. Next, start the MySQL service in XAMPP. Open the XAMPP control panel and click Start next to MySQL so your Laravel project can connect to the database. After starting MySQL, you can test if the service is running by connecting to it with a database tool like dbeaver. Now run the command p-artisan migrate in your terminal. When you run the migration, you might see a warning saying the Laravel JWT database doesn't exist. Laravel will ask if you'd like to create it. Just select yes, and it will create the database for you automatically. Once the migration is complete, open dbeaver and check your database to make sure the Laravel JWT database and its tables were created successfully. Step 4. Configure the authentication guard. Open config auth.php and update the API guard to use the JWT driver. This tells Laravel to use JWT for authenticating API requests instead of sessions. Now paste this code inside the guards section of your config auth.php file. This will set up the API guard to use JWT for authentication. Step 5. Update the user model. Open app models user.php and make it implement the JWT subject interface so it can work with JWT authentication. Now, replace the contents of your app models user PHP file with the updated code that implements JWT subject. This change makes the user model compatible with JWT authentication. Step 6. Create your API routes. Open routes api.php and define the routes your application will use for authentication and other API actions. Now you can define your routes inside routes api.php. This is where you'll add the endpoints for registering users, logging in, refreshing tokens, and accessing profile data. Step 7. Create the auth controller. This controller will handle user registration, login, logout, and token refresh for the API. First, run pp-artisan make controller API auth controller. Then open the newly created app HTTP controllers API auth controller, p-file, and add the authentication code. You can select and copy. You can now open app HTTP controllers API auth controller.php, select all, delete the default content, and paste this code inside. Register user, register. Login user, login. Get authenticated user, me. Logout user, logout. Refresh token, refresh. Helper method, respond with token, token. Step 8. Run Laravel server. In your terminal, type p-artisan serve. Select and paste run this. Your API will run at HTTP localhost 8000. Open Postman on your computer. This is the base URL you'll use in Postman for testing your API endpoints. Your API is now running at http:/localhost 8000. Use this as the base URL in Postman to test all your endpoints. How to use the API. Step 1. Register user. URL post API auth register. Body JSON. Can select and copy. Click paste to this API auth register and select post. Click on the body tab, then select raw and choose JSON from the drop down and paste your request JSON there. In the request body, include these fields: name, email, password, and password confirmation. Send this post request in Postman to register a new user in your Laravel JWT API. After sending the register request in Postman, open dbeaver and check your database. The users table, this confirms the registration was successful. Step 2. Login user. URL post API auth login. Body JSON. Select and copy this API auth login. Then click in the URL bar and paste it. Select the request method as post. Select and copy the main URL http localhost 8000. Paste the main URL and add API auth login at the end. Go to the body tab, then select raw. Select and copy this and paste this in the body raw JSON. Make sure the request body includes these parameters: email, password. Now you're ready to click send to make the request. If the login is successful, Postman will return this JSON response with the access token. You can use this token to call protected API routes. Step 3. Get profile. URL post API auth profile. Headers, authorization, bearer, access token. Select and copy this API auth profile. Create a new request in Postman and paste the URL at API layer auth profile. Go to the authorization tab or headers tab in Postman and add. Select bearer token in the authorization tab, then paste your access token into the token field. When login is successful, copy the access token from the response. Replace and paste the copied access token into the authorization tab value field. Copy http localhost 8000 and paste it into the request URL field. Click on the send button to execute the request. The response will return your profile information. Photo refresh token. URL post API auth refresh. Copy this API auth refresh. Create a new request in Postman and paste the URL. Change to method post. Copy http localhost 8000 and paste it into the request URL field. Go to the authorization tab or headers tab in Postman and add. When login is successful, copy the access token from the response. Replace and paste the copied access token into the authorization tab value field. Click on the send button to execute the request. If the refresh request is successful, you'll get a new access token in the response. After you use the old token and log out, that token becomes invalid. You won't be able to create a new token. You must log in again to get a valid token. Copy the new access token from the refresh response and paste it in the authorization header when making the next request. Click send again to generate a new access token. Copy the access token and paste it into the authorization tab value field. Click send again to make the request with the refresh token. 5. Logout. URL post API auth logout. Select and copy this. Create a new request in Postman and paste the URL. Change to method post. Copy http localhost 8000 and paste it into the request URL field. Go to the authorization tab or headers tab in Postman and add. Select bearer token in the authorization tab, then paste your access token into the token field. When login is successful, copy the access token from the response. Replace and paste the copied access token into the authorization tab value field. Click send on the logout request. Message is successfully logged out. This confirms that the token is now invalid and cannot be used for any protected routes. You've now built a secure JWT Authentication API using Laravel 12. This setup works perfectly for web or mobile apps that need stateless authentication. You can also host it with Docker for easy deployment. Want the full source code? You can download the complete Laravel 12 JWT API authentication example from my GitHub repository. Check the link in the description. Hi everyone, welcome back. In this video, I'll show you step by step how to add a bearer token for API testing in Postman. This guide walks you through a standard Postman workflow for JWT Authentication APIs. We'll create a Postman environment to store credentials and tokens and show requests for register, login, profile, refresh, and log out, including test and pre-request scripts. So Postman automatically manages the authorization bearer token header. This Laravel 12 JWT Authentication API tutorial project. In this guide, we'll be testing everything step by step on Postman, including user registration, login, profile refresh, and logout, all powered by JWT Authentication. You can download the complete Laravel 12 JWT API authentication example from my GitHub repo. The link is in the description below. On GitHub, click the code button, then choose HTTPS and copy the clone link. Now open a new terminal in VS Code. Type the command cd followed by your project path, and then type git clone followed by the link you just copied. This will download the project into your folder. In VS Code, just open the folder of the project we cloned. This will load the project structure in VS Code, and from here we can start looking at the API routes. Next, create a .env file in the root of your project to store your environment settings. Copy the example or env example file and rename it to m. In the .env file, uncomment the database settings. Then change the database driver from SQLite to MySQL. Now type the command composer update to install and update the project dependencies. We'll generate this key in the next step. To generate it, just run partisan key generate. This will set the ape key value in your env file automatically. Next, generate the JWT secret key and add it to your .env file. Terminal and run partisan JWT secret. This will add the JWT secret value automatically to your env file. Now run partisan migrate in your terminal. Before running the migration, make sure your database service is running. When you run partisan migrate, you might see a warning like the database Laravel does not exist on the MySQL connection. Laravel will then ask if you want to create it. Just choose yes to automatically create the database and proceed with the migrations. After running the migrations, you can check to make sure they were successful by opening your database and verifying that the tables like users and migrations have been created. Next, run pp artisan serve in your terminal to start the Laravel development server. Step 1. Create a Postman environment. Go to Environments, add in Postman. Now in Postman, add these environment variables. Base URL set to HTTP localhost 8000 API. You can also copy the base URL and paste it into the Postman environment variable. Create a new environment in Postman and give it a name, for example, API local. Now paste the base URL value into the environment. Select and copy this URL, HTTP localhost 8000 API, and then paste it into the base URL field in your Postman environment. Select and copy this email and paste it into the email field in your Postman environment. Select and copy this test@example.com and then paste it into the email field in Postman. Now select and copy this password and paste the password into the value field in Postman. Select and copy this password 33, and paste it into the password field. Select the token field, copy it, and leave it empty for now. And now click Save to store the environment variables. This environment will store your credentials and JWT token for all authentication requests. Step 2. Register a new user. Post the base URL auth register. You can select and copy. Click Create New Request in Postman. Select the post method and paste the URL, hospace URL auth register. Body raw JSON. You can select this URL and copy it for your Postman request. And then paste it into the raw body section of your Postman request. Next, click on the environment dropdown and select the environment we just created. In the API.p file, we define the register route like this. Then inside the auth controller, we create the register method. Now click send to submit the request. If everything is set up correctly, you'll see a success response with the registered user details, including the name, email, and a newly issued JWT access token. Let's also check in the users table in the database to make sure the registration was successful. Next, let's test the login endpoint. Note, registration is optional if you already have a user account. Step 3. login to get JWT. Post base URL auth login. Select this login endpoint post as base URL auth login and copy. Create a new request in Postman, set the method to post and enter the URL. In the body, choose raw JSON. Select this JSON body for login and copy. And paste the email and password from our environment variables. Now go to the test tab, then copy and paste the script to automatically save the token into our environment. Copy and paste the script to automatically save the token into our environment. Click send to make the login request. If the credentials are correct, the response will include a JWT access token. Note, this automatically saves the token in the environment variable token. Step 4, get authenticated user profile. Post your base URL auth profile. Select and copy this endpoint for profile. Click create new request. Select post as the method and paste the base URL auth profile into the request URL. Authorization bearer token a token. Under authorization, select bearer token and paste token. This tells Postman to use the saved JWT token for authentication. This endpoint uses the saved token to fetch user info. Now click send to make the request and fetch the user profile. If everything is set up correctly, the response will show the authenticated user's details like their name and email. This endpoint uses the saved token to fetch user info. Step 5, refresh JWT token. Post base URL auth refresh. Select and copy this endpoint and base URL auth refresh. Create a new request in Postman. Set the method to post and paste base URL auth refresh into the request URL. Under authorization, select bearer token and use /token. This ensures the refresh request uses the current JWT token. Now click send to refresh the token. The response will return a new JWT, and thanks to our test script, it automatically replaces the old token in the environment. In the API pub file, there's a route for refresh that points to the auth controller. In the test tab, paste this script to automatically update the token after every refresh request. This way, the environment variable always holds the latest valid token, and we don't have to copy and paste it manually. Now, if we click send on the profile request again without refreshing, it won't work because the old token is no longer valid. Click send on the refresh request again. A new JWT token is generated and automatically saved into the environment. Now go back to the profile request and click send again. This time it works because the refresh token is still valid and stored in the environment. Note, refresh ensures your token stays valid without logging in again. Step 6, logout user. Next, let's test the logout endpoint. Select and copy this base URL auth logout. Create a new request in Postman, set the method to post, and enter the URL base URL auth logout. Under authorization, choose bearer token and use token. In the tests tab, you can optionally add this script to clear the token from the environment after logout. Then click send to log the user out. The response will return a message like successfully logged out, and the token is now invalidated, meaning it can't be used for any more requests. Now try clicking send on the login request again. This will generate a fresh token and save it into the environment so you can continue making authenticated requests. Click send on the logout request. If you try clicking it again, you'll see the token is already invalid, so the request won't succeed a second time. Logging out invalidates the token. Optionally, you can clear the environment variable. Step 7, optional auto-refresh token. Add this pre-request script at the collection level to automatically log in if token is missing or expired. Here's the workflow summary. Register is optional to create a new user. Login saves the JWT token automatically. Profile uses the token to fetch user info. Refresh and updates the token if it's expired. And logout invalidates the token and optionally clears it from the environment. Summary. This is a compact, ready-to-publish tutorial that shows how to register, log in, save a JWT, bear a token in Postman, use it across all endpoints, refresh it, and log out, plus an optional pre-request script so you never have to copy and paste tokens again. And that's the full JWT authentication workflow in Postman. Happy coding! Hi everyone, welcome back. In this tutorial, I'll show you step by step how to build a Users Management API in Laravel 12 using JWT Authentication. We'll create full user CRUD operations and test everything with Postman. Let's get started. GitHub repo at the end of the video script. Here's the updated narration with the GitHub download line included. Head over to my GitHub repo, link is in the description. Once you're there, just click the green code button and copy the HTTPS URL. Inside the same file, we also have authentication routes for register, login, profile, logout, and refresh. These are handled by our auth controller. Step 1. Create user CRUD controller. First, let's generate a controller for user management. Run this command in your terminal. partisan make controller API user controller creates a new controller file. If the AP folder doesn't exist inside app.htp controllers, Laravel will automatically create it. Edit apathetic controllers API user controller. PHP can select this and copy. Now open app HTTP controllers API user controller PHP and paste this code. Here we have the index method. This method is responsible for listing all users in the database. Inside it, we call user all, which fetches every record from the users table. This store method creates a new user. It first validates the input, then saves the user with a hashed password, and finally returns the new user as JSON with a 201 created status. This show method returns a single user by their ID. If the user doesn't exist, it will automatically throw an error. His update method edits an existing user. It first finds the user by ID, validates the new data, updates only the provided fields, and then returns the updated user as JSON. This destroy method deletes a user by their ID. If the user exists, it's removed and we return a success message as JSON. Step 2. User Management Routes. Method, URI, action, controller method. This endpoint lists all users by returning every record in the users table as JSON. This endpoint creates a new user by validating the request data, saving it in the database, and returning the new user as JSON. This endpoint retrieves a single user by ID and returns the details as JSON. This endpoint updates a user's details by ID with the provided data. This endpoint deletes a user by ID and returns a success message. Step 3. Define API routes. In the API.php file, we define all authentication routes under the auth prefix for register, login, profile, logout, and refresh. Then, inside another middleware group, we set up the user routes, list users, create a user, show a user, update a user, and delete a user. Step 4. Test with Postman. Now run pp artisan serve to start the development server. By default, the API will be available at http 127.0.1 8000 in Postman. Create a new environment. Set the base URL to http to add localhost 8000 API, the email to test@example.com, the password to password123, and leave the token field empty for now. We'll update the token after login. Click Send on the register request to create a new user in the database. To log in, send a post request to auth login with the user's email and password in JSON. The response will return a token. Copy this token for authenticated requests. To get the user profile, send a GET request to your author profile and add the authorization header with bearer followed by your token. Click Send to fetch the authenticated user's profile details. To log out, send a post request to auth logout with the authorization header containing your token. This will invalidate the token. To list all users, send a GET request to users with the authorization header and your token. In Postman, create a new folder named User Management. Inside this folder, we'll organize all requests related to users like list, create, show, update, and delete. Add a GET request to users and save it as list users inside the user management folder. Remain to list users. Now click send on the list users request. You should see all registered users returned as JSON. Next, open the create user request. Set the method to post the users, add the authorization header with your token, then click send to create a new user. Create user. Add a post request to your users with JSON body for name, email, and password. Save it as create user. Click send on the create user request. This post request sends name, email, and password in JSON, and it creates a new user in the system. 7. Show user. Get users. Headers, authorization bearer, your token. Show user. Refresh in ToolDbeaver. Create a new request, set the method to get, and enter users 2. Add the authorization header with your token, then save it as show user inside the user management folder. Click send on the show user request. This get request to users 2 will return the details of the user with ID 2. A. Update user. Put users 2. Headers, authorization bearer, your token. Body JSON. Create a new request, set the method to put and enter users 2. Add the authorization header with your token, include a JSON body with the updated fields like name or password, then save it as update user inside the user management folder. Click send on the update user request. This will update the user with ID 2 and return the updated details in JSON. Delete user. Delete users 2. Headers, authorization bearer, your token. Create a new request, set the method to delete, and enter users 2. Add the authorization header with your token, then save it as delete user inside the user management folder. Click send on the delete user request. His will remove the user with ID 2 and return a success message in JSON. Refresh in ToolDbeaver. Send a post request to users with name, email, and password. A new user will be created. Send a delete request to users ID to remove a user. Send a get request to users with the token. You'll see all users. Conclusion, you now have JWT Authentication, Register, Login, Profile, Logout, Full User CRUD, List, Create, Show, Update, Delete, Complete Postman examples with Request Response JSON. This is production ready and can be extended with password reset. Email verification, user activity logs, API rate limiting. Download the complete Laravel 12 JWT API authentication example on my GitHub repo here. And that's how you build and test a Laravel 12 JWT User Management API in Postman. Thanks for watching. In this video, we'll build a secure Laravel 12 API with JWT roles and permissions using Spacey. Let's get started. This guide walks you through building a secure RESTful API in Laravel 12. Key features: JWT Authentication, token-based login system. Role permission management using Spacey Laravel permission. Clean RESTful endpoints following Laravel conventions. API endpoints. method, endpoint, purpose. Now let's test the get AP roles endpoint. This request will return a list of all roles stored in our database. Next, let's create a new role using the post API roles endpoint. Now let's look at the get API roles ID endpoint. This is used when you want to fetch the details of a specific role by its ID. Next, we'll update an existing role using the put AP roles ID endpoint. Now let's delete a role using the delete API roles ID endpoint. Next, let's test the get API permissions endpoint. This request will return a list of all permissions in the system. Finally, let's create a new permission using the post API permissions endpoint. Step 1, we need to install the Spacey Laravel permission package. In your terminal, run the command Composer requires Spacey Laravel permission. This will download and install the package into our Laravel project so we can start managing roles and permissions. Next, we need to publish the configuration and migration files for Spacey permission. In your terminal, run the command. This will copy the package's configuration file and the necessary migration files into our Laravel project. Now let's run the migrations to create the roles and permissions tables in our database. In the terminal, type ppartisan migrate. Once this command finishes, Laravel will have created all the necessary tables that Spacey permission needs to store roles, permissions, and their relationships with users. Now let's update the user model so it can work with both JWT Authentication and Spacey roles and permissions. Open the file app models user.ph. At the top, add. Then in the class definition, make the user model implement JWT subject and add the has roles trait. This will allow each user to be assigned roles and permissions and also support JWT token handling. Step 3, let's create the controllers for roles and permissions. In the terminal, run partisan make controller AP role controller API, and then partisan make the controller API permission controller API. These commands will generate two API controllers inside the app HTTP controllers API folder where we'll add the logic for managing roles and permissions. Step 4, let's build the role controller. Open the file app controllers API role controller PHP. Inside, we'll import the role model from Spacey and then add methods for listing, creating, showing, updating, and deleting roles. These methods will return JSON responses so our API follows RESTful standards. For example, the index method will return all roles. The store method will validate and create a new role. And the update and destroy methods will handle editing and deleting existing roles. Step 5, now let's create the permission controller. Open the file app HTTP controllers API permission controller PHP. Just like the role controller, we'll import the permission model from Spacey. In this controller, we'll keep it simple with two methods. The index method to list all permissions and the store method to validate and create a new permission. Both will return JSON responses so they can be consumed easily by our API clients. Step 6, let's define our API routes. Open the routes API.php file. Here we'll register routes for both roles and permissions. For roles, we'll use route API resource to automatically create RESTful endpoints for listing, creating, showing, updating, and deleting roles. For permissions, we'll define two routes, one for listing all permissions with a GET request and one for creating new permissions with a POST request. We'll also wrap these routes with the Auth API middleware, so only authenticated users with a valid JWT token can access them. Using route API resource ensures RESTful Laravel conventions. Step 7, let's test our API using Postman. First, make sure you log in to get a valid JWT token. Then for every request, add the header authorization bearer your token. Before we can test our roles and permissions endpoints, we need to log in and get a JWT token. In Postman, send a post request to API login. In the body, select raw JSON and enter your user's credentials like this. Before making any API request in Postman, make sure your Laravel server is running. In the terminal, type FI artisan serve login request again. When we send this request, the API will respond with a JWT access token. Copy that token because we'll need to include it in the headers for all of our protected endpoints. Start with get API roles to list all roles. List roles, get API roles. When we send this request, the API will return a JSON array containing all the roles currently stored in the database. Next, let's create a new role. In Postman, set the method to post and the URL to API roles. Again, make sure to include the JWT token in the header with in the body, choose raw, set it to JSON, and provide the role data. For example, after sending the request, the API will respond with the details of the newly created role, confirming that it was successfully added. Now let's list all roles again to verify that the new role we created has been added. After sending the request, you should see the updated list of roles, including the one we just created. Next, let's fetch the details of a single role by its ID. In Postman, set the method to get and the URL to API roles/ID, replacing ID with the actual role ID you want to check. Once you send the request, the response will return the specific role details such as its ID, name, and any associated permissions. Now let's update an existing role. In Postman, choose the put method and set the URL to API roles/ID, replacing ID with the role's actual ID. Go to the body tab, select raw and JSON, then enter the updated data such as a new role name. Don't forget to include the authorization header with your bearer token. After sending the request, the response will confirm that the role has been updated successfully. After updating the role, let's confirm the changes by listing all roles again. Now let's delete a role. In Postman, set the method to delete and the URL to API roles/ID, replacing ID with the role's actual ID. Be sure to include the authorization header with your bearer token. Once you send the request, the response will confirm that the role has been deleted successfully. Next, let's fetch all the available permissions. In Postman, set the method to get and enter the URL API lost permissions. Don't forget to include the authorization header with your bearer token. After sending the request, the response will display a list of all permissions defined in the system along with their IDs and names. Now let's create a new permission. In Postman, set the method to post and the URL to API permissions. Go to the body tab, select raw and JSON, then enter the permission data, for example. Make sure you include the authorization header with your bearer token. Once you send the request, the response will confirm that the new permission has been created successfully. After creating a new permission, let's list all permissions again to verify that it has been added. When we send the request, the response will show the updated list of permissions, including the one we just created. And that's it. You now have a fully functional Laravel 12 API featuring JWT Authentication, Role and Permission, management with Spacey, clean RESTful controllers and routes, and endpoints tested with Postman. This setup is scalable, secure, and ready for production. If you want to explore the full source code, you can download the complete Laravel 12 JWT API authentication example from my GitHub repository. Happy coding and thanks for following along. In this tutorial, we'll build a Products and Categories API in Laravel 12 with JWT Authentication. Let's quickly go over the API endpoints we'll build. For categories, first, we have get API lost categories. This endpoint is used to fetch and display a list of all categories available in the system. Next is post API categories. This allows us to create a brand new category by sending the required data, like the category name in the request body. Then we have get API categories ID. This retrieves the details of a specific category identified by its unique ID. The PUT API categories ID endpoint is used to update an existing category. Finally, we have delete the API categories plus ID. This removes a category permanently from the database, again based on its ID. Now let's look at the API endpoints for products. First is get API products. This retrieves a list of all products, and each product includes its related category information. Next, we have post API's products. This is where we create a new product. Then there's get API products ID. This lets us view the details of a specific product, including its category relationship. The PUT API products ID endpoint is used to update an existing product. Finally, delete API products ID removes a product from the database, again based on its ID. Let's start with step 1, creating models and migrations. First, we generate the models with their migrations by running these commands. This creates 2 models, category and product, each with its own migration file. Next, let's set up our database structure. In the categories migration, we'll define a simple table with just an ID, a unique name, and timestamps. Then in the products migration, we'll define the products table. Each product has an ID, a name, an optional description, a price, and a foreign key that links it to a category. Notice how we use a foreign key on category ID. This ensures that each product is always tied to a valid category. Also with onDelete cascade, if a category gets deleted, all of its related products are automatically removed as well. Finally, to apply these migrations, run partisan migrate. At this point, our database tables for categories and products are ready, and we can start building relationships between them. Now let's move to step 2, defining relationships between our models. In the category model, we want to show that each category can have many products. A has many relationship. This means a single category like electronics can have multiple products such as iPhones, laptops, or cameras. Next, in the product model, we define the inverse relationship using belongs to. This tells us that each product is linked to exactly one category. For example, an iPhone belongs to the electronics category. Now let's move to step 3, creating controllers. In Laravel, controllers handle the logic behind each endpoint. Since we're building an API, we'll generate 2 controllers, one for categories and one for products. We can create them using artisan commands. The API flag tells Laravel to generate controllers that are set up for API resources. That means we get methods like index, store, show, update, and destroy. But we don't get the extra methods used in web controllers like create and edit. Next is step 4, building the category controller. This controller will handle all the CRUD operations for categories. Let's break it down. The index method returns a list of all categories in JSON format. The store method lets us create a new category. Before saving, it validates that the name is required, a string, and unique. The show method retrieves a single category by its ID. If it doesn't exist, it throws a 404 error automatically. The update method updates an existing category. It also validates the new name, ensuring it's still unique, but allows the current category's own name. Finally, the destroy method deletes a category by ID and returns a success message. So with this controller, we now have full CRUD functionality for categories: list, create, view, update, and delete. Alright, let's move on to step 5, product controller. This controller handles all the logic for managing products, including listing, creating, showing, updating, and deleting products. The index method returns all products, and we use with category, so each product comes with its category details. The store method validates input and creates a new product. The show method retrieves a single product by ID, again including its category. The update method lets us modify an existing product with the same validation rules as when creating. Finally, the destroy method deletes a product by its ID. With this controller, we now have full CRUD functionality for products. Now that we've created our controllers, let's connect them to routes so the API endpoints actually work. Open Routes API PHP and add the following code. We import both category controller and product controller at the top. We wrap everything inside route middleware auth API to ensure all category and product routes require authentication. Then we use root AP resource for both categories and products. This automatically generates all the standard RESTful API routes: index, store, show, update, and destroy. The final step to bring your Laravel API online locally is to run. This will start the Laravel development server, usually at. Now that our routes are ready, let's move to step 7, testing with Postman. We'll use Postman to send requests to our API and verify that everything works as expected. Categories endpoints. Get API categories, list all categories. Need to log in first to get a token before making any request. Send a post request to your login endpoint. If successful, the response will include a JWT token. Once logged in with a valid token, you can send get API categories, list categories. The response depends on what's in your database. Post API categories. Create category request and response flow. Since our routes are protected, don't forget to include your bearer token in the authorization header. In the request body, we'll pass the category name as JSON like this. If the request is valid, the API will respond with a 201 created status along with the new category data. Get API categories by ID. Show category details. Next, let's try retrieving a single category by its ID. We'll send a GET request to World API Categories 1. Put AP categories ED updated category. Now let's test updating an existing category. We'll send a PUT request to our API Categories 1. In the request body, we'll pass the updated name as JSON like this. If successful, the API responds with the updated category details. The name column changes from electronics and smartphones. Delete API categories ID. Delete category. We'll send a delete request to API categories 1. As always, include the bearer token in the authorization header. If the category exists, the API responds with a success message. After this, if we check the database, the record with ID 1 will be gone from the categories table. We're creating a new category. Send a post request to API categories. If the request is successful, the server responds with a status code 201 created, shows the new category with its ID name and timestamps. First, we list products. Send a GET request to AP products. The server replies with all products, including their category details. Next, we create a product. Send a post request to API products. For example, iPhone 17, latest Apple smartphone, 999999, category 1. The server replies with 201 created and shows the new product details. Open the products table and we can see the new record. This confirms the product was successfully saved. Next, let's try showing a single product. I'll send a GET request to API products 1. The response comes back with the product details. We can see the ID, the name, which is iPhone 17, the description, the price, and the category ID. Now let's test our products listing again. If everything is working, the API will respond with a JSON array of all products. Now let's update our existing product. In Postman, switch the method to put and enter the URL. Paste in the following JSON payload. Once everything is ready, click send. If the update is successful, the API will respond with the updated product details, something like this. That confirms the product record has been updated in the database. Now let's see how to delete a product using our API. In Postman, set the method to delete and enter the endpoint. Go to the headers tab and add your JWT token. Click send. If the product is deleted successfully, you'll get a confirmation response like this. And when you check your database or try to fetch the same product again with a get by API products 1, it will return a 404 not found, confirming the deletion. Alright, we've reached the end of this tutorial. You now have a fully functional Products Categories API in Laravel 12 secured with JWT Authentication. With this foundation in place, you can now extend the API further. For example, by adding authentication features, user roles, or permission-based access control. If you'd like to explore the complete project, I've shared the full source code on my GitHub repo. The link is in the description. That's it for today's session. Thank you for watching, and as always, happy coding. Welcome back, developers. In today's video, we're going to build something super practical for any Laravel project, a Settings and Config API powered by JWT Authentication. Before we jump into the code, let's quickly look at the API endpoints we'll be building. First, we have a GET request to API settings, which will return a list of all settings in our database. Then a GET request to API settings/key, which fetches a specific setting by its key. Next, a POST request to API settings for creating a brand new setting. A PUT request to API settings/key to update an existing setting. And finally, a delete request to API settings/key to remove a setting from the database. With these 5 endpoints, we'll have full CRUD functionality for managing application settings through a clean and secure API. Alright, let's get started with step 1, creating our model and migration. In your terminal, run the command pp artisan make model setting m. This will generate a setting model along with a migration file. Inside the migration file, we'll define our database structure. Now let's open the migration file that was created for us, create settings table.php. Inside the up method, we'll define the structure of our settings table. We add a key column, which is a string and must be unique since each setting should only appear once. Once this is ready, save the file and run. Puppy artisan migrate. This command will create the settings table in the database and we'll be all set to move on. Moving on to step 2, creating the setting model. Open the file located at app model setting page. Here, we'll define which fields can be mass assigned by adding them to the fillable property. In our case, that's the key and the value. Next up, step 3, creating the controller. In your terminal, run the command @artisan make controller API setting controller API. This will generate a brand new controller inside the AP folder named setting controller. Now let's open up our setting controller and add the logic for each endpoint. First, in the index method, we return all settings from the database as JSON with a status code of 200. Next, in the show method, we look up a specific setting by its key using first or fail. If it exists, we return it as JSON. For the store method, we validate the incoming requests. The key must be required, a string, and unique in the settings table. In the update method, we first fetch the setting by its key. Then we validate only the value field since the key should not change. Finally, in the destroy method, we fetch the setting by its key, delete it, and return a JSON message confirming that the setting was deleted. Now it's time for step 4, defining our API routes. Open the routes API PHP file, and at the top, import our controller. Use API TPR controllers API setting controller. Next, we'll group all of our routes inside a middleware called Auth API. This ensures that every request to these endpoints requires a valid JWT token, keeping our settings API secure. Inside the group, we define 5 routes. With these routes in place, our controller methods are now connected to the outside world and our API is ready to be tested. Alright, let's move on to step 5, testing our API in Postman. First, let's try the GET request to API settings. This will return a list of all the settings currently stored in the database. For example, the response might look like this. As you can see, each setting is stored as a key value pair, making it super easy to manage and retrieve configuration data. Before we start testing our API in Postman, make sure your Laravel development server is running. One important step before testing, since our routes are protected with JWT, we need to log in first to get an access token. This confirms that our index route is working correctly. Next, we'll test creating a new setting. Now let's test the create setting endpoint with a post request to API settings. In Postman, select post and enter the request body in JSON format like this. When we send this request, our API will validate that the key is required and unique, then create a new record in the database. If everything is successful, the response will return the newly created setting along with the 201 created status. This confirms that our API can now add new settings dynamically. Now that we've created a new setting, let's go back and run the get request to API settings again. Next, let's test the get specific setting endpoint. In Postman, send a get request to the API setting site name. Here, site name is the key we created earlier. The API will look up this setting in the database and return just that one record. The response should look like this. This makes it super easy to fetch individual settings without having to load the entire list. Now let's update an existing setting. In Postman, send a PUT request to API settings site name. Here we're targeting the setting with the key site name. In the request body, we only need to provide the value field like this. When we send this request, the API will update the setting in the database and return the updated record. This confirms that our update method is working and we can modify settings dynamically. Finally, let's test the delete setting endpoint. In Postman, send a delete request to API settings site name. This will look for the setting with the key site name, remove it from the database, and return a confirmation message. If we try to fetch that setting again, we'll get a 404 not found, which means it has been successfully removed. Next, let's make this even easier to use inside Laravel by creating a simple helper function. Now that our API works perfectly, let's make it even easier to use inside Laravel with a global helper function. First, create a new file, apphelper.settinghelper.php. Inside, add this code. This function lets us grab any setting with a single call. Next, open composer.json and register the helper under the autoload section. Then run composer dump autoload. If the key exists in the database, it will return the value. Otherwise, it falls back to your default. Now, anywhere in your app, you can call site name is settings site name default app. You now have a fully functional settings config API in Laravel 12 with JWT Authentication. That with this setup, your Laravel project is now more dynamic, configurable, and front-end ready. You can grab the Laravel 12 JWT API authentication example on my GitHub. Thanks for watching. If this video helped you, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more Laravel tutorials in the next video.